So have heart, New York Yankees fans. In a parallel universe, you're not playing the Toronto Blue Jays in the playoffs because Montreal, Toronto exploded for big 10-run games in the first two at the Skydome, but they could have been the Toronto Giants of the National League. So today we're going to look at a little bit of history of Toronto's almost joining the National League West. They probably had to reconfigure. Now, in January '76, San Francisco Giants owner Horace Stoneman agreed to sell the team for $13.25 million to a Toronto group, which was led by Don McDougall and consisted of Labatt Breweries of Canada Limited, Vulcan Assets Limited, owned by the Globe and Mail chairman and president Howard Webster, and the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. The team was begun play in the '76 season at Exhibition Stadium on the CNE grounds, which had undergone a reconfiguration to be suited for baseball as part of the city's push towards an MLB team, and would have been called the Toronto Giants. Now, however, the plan to move the Giants was quashed by a U.S. court. Following the court ruling, Bob Lurie purchased the Giants and kept them in San Francisco. Now, it was a weird configuration. Again, the Toronto had been mentioned as a potential major league city as early as the 1880s, and been home to the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team of the International League from 1896 to 1967. Again, in January '76, the Giants nearly relocated to Toronto after Horace Stoneman agreed to sell the team. Now, a court ruling halted the move, and the Giants remained in San Francisco. Despite the setback, Toronto's ambition for an MLB team persisted, leading to the successful bid in the 1976 American League expansion, driven by the need to balance the league after Seattle was granted a team as a result of a lawsuit that were successful over the loss of the Pirates. The new Toronto franchise, purchased for $7 million, was named the Toronto Blue Jays, following a contest that attracted more than 4,000 suggestions. The name reflected Toronto's tradition of using blue in team colors. It was influenced by majority owner Labatt Breweries' flagship beer, Labatt Blue, which was not sold at Exhibition Stadium early on. The franchise's first employee, Paul Beeston, began as VP of Business Operations, and before the inaugural '77 season, Peter Bavasi and Pat Gillick were appointed as president and assistant GM, respectively. When the Blue Jays debuted on April 7, '77, with a win against the White Sox amid a snowstorm, it marked the beginning of a journey from early struggles to eventual success. Now, throughout the late '70s and early '80s, the Blue Jays showed gradual improvement, highlighted by their first winning season in 1983. Now, obviously, San Pedro de Macorís athletes, Guerrero and a few others have been big part of the franchise for a while. Now, when the expansion had occurred, Toronto had already reconfigured Exhibition Stadium to accommodate Major League Baseball in anticipation of the Giants' relocation there, and again continue to push for an MLB franchise. MLB decided to expand in '76 and settle a lawsuit filed by the local governments in Seattle, Washington, against the American League for breach of contract due to the relocation of their Seattle Pilots to Milwaukee after only one season. To keep the league with even number of teams with addition of new Seattle expansion franchise in the West, a formal expansion proceeding was held with a second team being awarded to Toronto. A consortium composed of Labatt's Breweries 45%, Webster 45%, and CIBC 10% purchased the rights for the franchise for $7 million. However, even after the franchise was awarded, the future of baseball in Toronto appeared uncertain. Then U.S. President Gerald Ford had attempted to put pressure on MLB to give Washington, D.C. an expansion franchise instead of Toronto. Washington had been without Major League Baseball since the Senators were moved to Arlington, Texas, to become the Texas Rangers following the '72 season, and would continue to do so until 2005 when Canada's first MLB team, the Montreal Expos, relocated to Washington, D.C. to become the Nationals. Now, following this development, there was brief speculation by Metro Toronto chairman Paul Godfrey, among others, that Washington would be awarded Toronto's American League franchise, and Toronto would instead be awarded a National League expansion franchise. However, Ford's attempts did not amount to anything, and Toronto was allowed to keep its American League expansion franchise. So we already know, ladies and gentlemen, that Earl Weaver did not want Toronto in the AL East. He said so many times, and he always had a chip in his shoulder when it came to Toronto. Now, The Blue Jays and Mariners were approved as part of the 77 expansion discussions. The team was represented by legal counsel Herb Soloway and Gord Kirk. Kirk prepared the original documents which led to the foundation of the team in 76. Again, Paul Beeson was the first employee. Now, the name Blue Jays came about in 76 when the team held a name the squad contest, which involved more than 4,000 suggestions. 154 people suggested the name Blue Jays, and Dr. William Mills, a periodontist from Etobicoke, was selected from a draw as the grand winner. Mills stated that it was traditional for a Toronto-based sports team to have the color blue as the primary color, and following the leads of the Orioles and Cardinals, that the team be named after a bird. Another theory was that Blue Jays was chosen by majority owner Labatt Breweries and apparent tie-in with the feature brand Labatt Blue. However, it is very likely that the team would have used blue as one of their colors in any event, because blue had been the primary color for many of Toronto's top-level teams. Unfortunately, Toronto Raptors and Toronto FC, which both came in existence, would break with this tradition, with both adopting red as their primary colors. Now, the Argos had blue as well, which started in 1873. The Blue Jays nickname was primarily used, albeit unofficially, by the Philadelphia Phillies during the 1940s, which ironically we played in the World Series. Now again, the first game at Exhibition Stadium, a win over Chicago White Sox, drew a home crowd of 44,649. The game is remembered for the minor snowstorm, which began just before the game started. Toronto won the snowy affair 9-5, led by the dearly departed Doug Alt's 2 home runs. That win was one of only 54 to 57 in the 77 season, as the Blue Jays finished in last place in the AL East with a 54-107 record. Now, Gillick became GM after the season, which is a position he held until 94. Now, the first few seasons were rough to begin with, but like I said, by the early 80s came around, he almost hit the 500 mark in the early 1980s. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Blue Jays, as you see it now, they're very big on the road. They're very big across Canada. And if anybody's going to agree on Canada's team, there's only 2 Canada's team. Well, the first one will always be the Montreal Canadiens, and the second one, because the Maple Leafs have lost that what they call co-title, the Blue Jays are Canada's team. Women love the team, kids love the team. Blue Jays of all shapes and forms love the team. It's a very uniting force because, especially the AL East champion this year, they're a series of overachievers. Now, if we advance to the final, it's either, I think, it's going to be interesting if we're going to play Detroit, because that's been an old rival. I think if everything goes good, Toronto will be heading to the World Series, but with Ellie in the mix, you never know. So that's the story of the Toronto Giants, which led to Toronto Blue Jays. If you like what you're doing here with our baseball podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.